There's a certain kind of person who, in the middle of a conflict, goes completely quiet, not because they have nothing to say, not because they don't feel anything, but because something inside them, something older than the argument itself, pulls them inward. The words are there, the feelings are there, but the door closes anyway. And if you've ever been that person, you already know what it's like to watch someone interpret your silence as indifference, when on the inside, you're anything but quiet. Society tends to label this as being passive-aggressive, or emotionally unavailable, or just difficult. People say things like, "You shut me out," or "Why won't you just talk to me?" as if the silence were a choice being made against them, as if it were a weapon. But that framing misses something important. It misses almost everything, actually. There's a word that gets used in psychology for what happens to a person right before they go silent, and it's not stubbornness, and it's not manipulation. It's called emotional flooding. And understanding it changes everything about how you see this pattern. When a person who tends toward silence encounters emotional pain, conflict, disappointment, feeling unseen, their nervous system doesn't just react, it overwhelms. The brain's threat detection center, the amygdala, registers the emotional pain in a way that is, neurologically speaking, indistinguishable from physical danger. The prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for language, for forming sentences, for articulating what you feel, goes partially offline. Words don't come because, in that moment, the architecture for words has been temporarily bypassed. Researcher John Gottman, who spent decades studying emotional responses in conflict, found that some people reach a physiological threshold during arguments where their heart rate spikes sharply, and their capacity for rational communication collapses. Their body is in a state that looks like calm on the outside, but internally resembles someone running from something they can't name. The silence isn't chosen, it's physiological. But the question that goes deeper is this: why do some people reach that threshold faster or more consistently than others? Why does emotional flooding become the default for certain people and not others? The answer almost always lives somewhere in the past. For many people who go silent when they're hurt, early environments taught them, not in words, but in experience, that expressing emotional pain was unsafe, unwelcome, or useless. Maybe the emotional expression wasn't met with care. Maybe it was met with more conflict, or dismissal, or someone who became more distressed than they were. Maybe they learned early that the only way to survive an emotionally volatile room was to become invisible in it. The nervous system is a brilliant adapter. It learned. It took the lesson that speaking up when hurt leads somewhere worse, and it encoded it so deeply that it now runs automatically, without permission, without thought. What began as a survival strategy in childhood became the wiring of an adult. This is not a character flaw. This is a nervous system that did exactly what nervous systems are supposed to do. It protected you. And here's where it becomes important to say clearly: this is not a better or worse way of being than someone who becomes more vocal or expressive when hurt. There is no hierarchy here. People who talk louder in conflict aren't more emotionally healthy. People who go quiet aren't more damaged. These are different patterns that developed in different environments, shaped by different pressures. Both are understandable. Neither is the ideal that the other should aspire to. But there is one counterintuitive thing about people who go silent when they're hurt, one thing that's almost never talked about. Their silence usually contains more than other people's words. When someone who typically internalizes their pain finally does speak, when the silence breaks, it tends to be precise, carefully observed, not reactionary but considered. Because all that time spent in silence wasn't empty, it was processing. It was turning the hurt over and over until its shape became clear. These are often people with a profound inner life, people who feel things deeply enough that language, in the immediate moment, simply cannot hold it all. The quiet cost of this pattern, though, is distance. The people who love someone who goes silent often don't know what to do with it. They feel rejected or powerless or shut out when the truth is the opposite. The silence is rarely about them. It's about a nervous system that learned to fold inward under pressure and hasn't yet found a bridge between the inside and the outside. That bridge, when it's built, doesn't come from forcing words out before they're ready. It comes from recognizing that the silence was never the enemy. It was always just protection. Protection that made complete sense once. Protection that might, slowly, be needed a little less. If you recognize yourself in this, the most important thing to know is simply this: you are not broken. You are not cold or withholding or emotionally absent. You are a person who learned to hold things inside because, at some point, that was the safest place to put them. That way of being has kept you intact through things that might have undone someone else. And if something in this felt like it described more than just the silence, if it touched something about the way you move through relationships, through conflict, through the moments when you feel the most, there's more here worth understanding about yourself. The silence is usually just the beginning of a much longer story.